I really wanted to create the kind of ecosystem that I wish I had when I was younger. We have quite a few advisors who are partners from different VC firms, like such as ACNZ, Pair, Primary, among other top like VC firms, as well as like we have some breakout founders, like the founder of Corgi. People will be able to come here, learn from the best investors, advisors, as well as like providing their own like knowledge and the trends that they're seeing or interesting company that they're finding on their campus or on in their ecosystem.
Who is the ideal fellow for this? Like, how are you choosing all of these young people? What does a typical profile look like?
I don't think there's any like typical profile, but like we do have like a popular persona, which is
A couple days ago, you threw the biggest, baddest, and most curated smart AI summits ever with C-levels from iconic tech companies and top VCs. You are the most well-connected person in the Valley, a best-selling author, and now started G Fellows to help the next generation. Grace, welcome to the pod.
thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate you for having me here.
Really looking back, right? When you connect the dots all the way, what life experiences and career roles have made you become the investor you are today?
And obviously, as a media nerd, I'm like such a huge fan and supporter. First of all, kudos to you to like create a show for yourself, as well as like featuring some amazing guests. So I think speaking of like early childhood, I would say I'm always been like a really curious person. I've always been like really curious about like how to, how things works, whether it's business or like technology, or I think back in time, there's not much like technology going on, but it's more of like, how business works and how business evolve in general. I always have like a fascination of media. At like 8 years old, joining like the school newspaper to write for them, doing I would say it was not like a podcast, but it was more of like broadcasting as like using a microphone to announce like when it's a lunch break, that kind of stuff, or like the interesting news on campus. Basically podcasting since age 8 because it was like a third grade to fifth grade. I was like, um being like the organizer for like the student media organization stuff. So I've always been like really loving media. I think it really feeds into my curiosity as a young person, as a person who is like more like grown up as like a entrepreneur. I think curiosity definitely makes a huge difference because that's how you kind of like learn more about stuff and actually find out about the newest technology, as well as like finding out about the newest like piece of news in AI. That's how you kind of like learn about how the universe works.
And it sounds like media is also something that brought you to the US. What was that decision behind literally just like moving over to the US and actually staying there?
I think I was really lucky because of I went to an international high school and like I was so I feel like I always knew that I was going to study abroad because I think it really kudos to my parents as well as like their friends, like a lot of people trying to, making a lot of sacrifices to like help their kids to go to like a better school and then like to, get the education from the US. Obviously, I think the US is a very diverse country and you can learn a lot more about like, different cultures as well as like how things work. So I think like just like literally I would say I would credit my parents on that. And like in terms of like studying in the US, I feel like it's really just like broadened my like understanding of how other culture and how different things works. And I think going back to the media piece is like I would say back in time, I was just genuinely curious about stuff. And the media is like something I'm interested in because I'm always like reading about new stuff and like, listening to the stories on like radios. And yeah, I feel like I've always been like a knowledge junkie.
Yeah. And then when you came to the US, you're like, oh my gosh, like there's so much information. And this is like the type of chaos or maybe like environment that you can thrive in. So you came to the US, right? When did that transition of like going to VC actually happen or investing?
I think like living in Silicon Valley, you naturally interact with a lot of like VCs and entrepreneurs. When I was in the US, like I think like I was working at a normal job, I would say, and then like at my job after work, I encounter like a lot of entrepreneur at different meetups, or like I remember going to a lot of hacker houses for like parties when I was younger, and a lot of people are I got really lucky to be friends with a lot of like the TL fellows or like the Forbes study. A lot of the younger people who are already like having some kind of success in entrepreneurship. And I kind of started like meeting them, and like I got really fascinated from the the conversation I'm hearing. I feel like really wanted to share that piece of information for my younger self, because I didn't know that entrepreneurship could be a path. Like, my dream job was, be a CEO of like a Fortune 500 company, but it was never really like starting my own company. Though I did study like an English newspaper in my school, and it was like more of like a hobby, though we were profitable at school because of like, it's more of like, selling it to your fellow students, or like, it's like a kind of student run small business, and so just student run organization. But in the US, I feel like a lot of my peers, they started a company in their high school or in their middle school. They all like continuously running it in college, or like even after college, to make it like an actual success of their business. So I already met peers that are like, so company to Apple when I just arrived here. So I feel like I wanted to share that piece of knowledge to the rest of the universe to help them understand how business function, and maybe like potentially this could be a path for them as well. So that's kind of how I started and stumbled onto the journey of like VC and entrepreneurship. Fast forward to, the 2020, in the middle of 2020, everybody was stuck at home during the pandemic. And then I decided to, started the podcast to help, people to learn about technology and business, because again, like as a entrepreneur, or like as a younger person, I like completely I was like, I feel like I was so blessed with the opportunity to meet some of the iconic tech leaders in Silicon Valley. I really wanted to share that piece of knowledge for, people like my younger self who may not be in Silicon Valley, who may not be ever having the access to encounter some of these amazing people, like what you're doing right now with your VC podcast. So you're sharing a piece of information to the general public so that people would be able to, get to know an industry that's like more formerly opaque, but now it's like getting a lot more transparent.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing is that, maybe there is a lot more access to like all these VCs and
Mhm,
leaders in the startup ecosystem in the valley. But then even for like people who is, younger, they might just came from China, maybe like you. So, and then they're like, okay, where do I start? And they could even start by just like listening to your
mhm,
podcast, which is like basically, live like every single day. If they just do that, they can learn about the startup ecosystem really, really quickly. With all of these like knowledge from all of these leaders that you've talked to, you've created this fellowship called G Fellows. Talk
mhm.
about what that is.
I feel like I was really lucky to be the person who have been able to like interact with some of the most iconic tech leaders, whether it's VCs or like top founders and tech executives on my podcast, or in Silicon Valley in general, or through our events. But I really wanted to create the kind of ecosystem that like I wish I had when I was younger. I think I was a part of like a lot of the tech community, or like the tech hacker houses community early on, that I got really lucky. But I feel like being able to work with some of these people, having the opportunity to learn from like the top tech leaders, just building the bridge between like the younger tech future leaders to the current leaders, to help them like, start the conversation, to learn from the best, is like something that I wish I had early on. So now, because of like, I feel like I was able to meet a lot of these great people, I wanted to share the network with the younger generation to help them succeed. And like, I wouldn't just call it like giving back, but also like, I feel like the younger fellows kind of have a lot to share to the people who have a really established career as well, because they have the fresh perspective. I really wanted to bridge the gap between these two, so that like, the people with access and a lot of like knowledge can kind of like help the younger people who is less experienced but with fresh perspective to grow. And also the younger folks in the tech industry, they will be the next generation leaders. I want them to provide like, their perspective to, help the, matured company grow as well.
Yeah. And talk about what that fellowship actually looks like.
The official fellowship kickoff will be tomorrow. What the fellowship look like is like the fellows have, so like the advisors will come in and then basically essentially providing their perspective and then their career journey to share with the fellows, and the fellows will be able to identify new trends in the tech industry, as well as like scouting like different young talents with like entrepreneur leadership, as well as like different amazing projects or companies to the rest of the group. And then everybody everybody can help, providing their perspective and feedback to the founders to help them grow. The fellows people will be able to come here, learn from the best investors, advisors, as well as like providing their own like knowledge and the trends that they're seeing or interesting company that they're finding on their campus or on in their ecosystem. And
Yeah, and it sounds like, you really are bridging that gap between the young people's perspective of what is innovation, right? Because young people knows that the best. And then the older people, they have more access, they have more knowledge on what happens in different cycles, and you really are bridging that gap. So talk about like why and who are, the advisors, the mentors in this program.
yeah, so we have quite a few advisors who are partners from different VC firms, like such as ACNZ, Pair, Primary, among other top like VC firms, as well as like we have some breakout founders, like the founder of Corgi. So they recently raised a huge round of like early stage funding, and they're very just like I feel like they're providing a lot of like fresh perspective in the AI ecosystem, as well as like some executives and leaders from like places like OpenAI to help share their perspective to the community.
Yeah, and who is the ideal fellow for this? Like, how are you choosing all of these young people? What does a typical profile look like? Or is there no typical profile?
I don't think there's any like typical profile, but like we do have like a popular persona that who applied, which is like I think we did have a lot of like president of different clubs on like different top campus that they are a lot of like basically a lot of applicants are like on each tech campus like leaders in the entrepreneur club or like the VC club on campus, as well as like we have quite a few hackers who have won multiple well-known hackathons and just like basically folks who are really passionate about VC and entrepreneur ecosystem. I don't think we have a set profile. We were really lucky to get profile of like all types, but I would say like the general patterns like people really enjoy entrepreneurship and basically like the venture capital ecosystem. And then they wanted to be like a part of it. So like a lot of people wanted to work in different startups for the future, as well as like different. I think their dream job would be like either becoming an entrepreneur or VC or working in tech in general.
Yeah, and going a little more specific into the program structure, does that mean there's going to be a lot of one-on-ones? Is there going to be like mentors just giving presentations? Or how much of, I guess, like bonding does the fellows get with the advisors?
I would say we do have a lot of community time. I would say like whether it's like the advisors coming in, as well as like a lot of the fellows will join the chat, as well as just like I think a lot of it's like a community time. And in terms of like one-on-one, I do think because of our fellowship program started like a few weeks ago that like a lot of the core fellows are already meeting with each other and started like working together on different things. So I would say like yeah, there's like um one-on-one time that if you are so it's kind of like similar to any type of fellowship program. It's like how you make of it. So like some active member may able to get more like one-on-one time, whether it's from the advisor or from the group member or so it really depends on like how active you are within the community. And we do have a lot of community bonding time as like, folks are like, talking about the trends and talking about like how to make the program better and us like, working together. So I feel like as a fellow, honestly, like from my personal perspective, as like a former fellow myself for other VC fellowship program, I do feel like I benefit more from talking with peers and talking with like the advisors. Obviously previously our advisors have been, the price of YC was advising the Floodgate fellowship that I was a part of, as well as like the founders of Instagram was like giving a talk at our program. And I feel like I love those talks. I feel like those are very inspirational. But I love the hands-on time that I spend with other fellowship members, and some of them became like my personal best friends that I have been to, their birthday party or like their important anniversary celebration. And like, those becoming the times that personally feel like it's like very important to my life and then very fulfilling, whether it's from like the business perspective or from like, a friendship perspective. So I feel like the fellows can get a lot out of it from being a part of the fellowship to make friends and be colleagues of like some of the fellows in general.
So let's talk about how aspiring VCs can start to build relationships with VCs. I know you're natural at this, but like try to explain it to people. Let's say the aspiring VC has gotten a meeting with the VC. How do they start to build that relationship?
I think generally being like a really mindful person really helps. So for example, like being able to providing value, providing like, a fresh perspective, just being thoughtful, like, the stuff that you're doing. It's like whether it's like researching the person that you're meeting with or being able to like providing value to them. I think like there's like it's similar to any type of relationship that you have. It's like if you're making a friend, thinking about your friend, being able to like, helping them with what they want to work on. I don't think there's like much beyond that. There really is like any other relationship that you're building with anyone else in the world. I think in general, like it is all like fate and then it is all like vibe. I feel like the more you're like really trying to force it down to something, the less successful you will be. So the more you're like trying to get something out of someone, like people are not stupid. Like they will sense like, what's going on. So like I don't think people will feel super comfortable to be like, oh, let me share like more about myself or like let me being able to like, give you that like a formula. I think it just really comes down to like, treating other people like a human being instead of treating them like, like "Oh, I need to gain a job right after this." So I think those are like literally my 2 cents. I don't have like more beyond that because like I think a lot of it is like just like treating people like a human being. Like I literally don't think there's like a pattern or like a formula of like, oh, here's my sales funnel about myself. I literally just feel like that's not the right way to treat anyone. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this is exactly it. For all the aspiring VCs listening to this, I know you've asked me like these questions a lot before, and you just don't have to overthink it, right? Like Grace literally told you that it happens because maybe it's the right timing and then it's mutual selection, or maybe it's just like you guys have a good vibe. And how do you do that? You just control what you do yourself, which is make sure that you are prepared. Make sure you research a lot about them. Like I personally just like usually might watch like a podcast or two, the one that they filmed, and then I'll learn more about like how and what type of person they are. But yeah, as someone, on the investment side and the media side of things, what on earth does your typical day actually look like? And maybe go to like last week, a day in your calendar, and then tell me like 9 a.m. I did this, 10, 11, and then all the way down.
So last week was like the week of our summit, the Smart AI Leadership Summit. So we did three within a year, and then so the last one is one of our the most like kind of like curated as well as like the biggest one yet. So we had like over 400 people came actually, and a lot of them are like leaders at different tech companies as well as like top investors, as both like some of the speakers and some of them are attendees, and same as like founders. So a typical day, I don't personally feel like I have a typical day because of like some of the times that we're focusing on particular projects. I would say a lot of the times it's just literally a bunch of meetings or just like a lot of like core working time on like researching our panelists or coming up with interesting discussion topics and just like literally what you see outside is what you see inside. Literally just like I feel like I'm a very built in public person. So like I mean, I do these like live streams and same as kudos to yourself, like doing these podcasts to learn from people. And yeah, that's about it. Like I feel like it's just meetings and like deep work time and like writing stuff down, like researching stuff. A lot of times I don't think of it as like a former like formal research time. So because of all our guests are like very fairly like high profile, so like a lot of times I will be organically already listening to their podcast or like already reading some pieces that they have written on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or I feel like I already kind of like consume a lot of their content. So like just like organically, I don't think like there's like, oh, I have to do 5 hours. But sometimes if the guests have a book, sometimes I just like read the whole book or like listening to it.
Do you have like a chief of staff? Do you have like a media team? What does that look like on your side?
I just use StreamYard and I just stream. Like that's literally my process. And like I'm a pretty generic person. I feel like, but nowadays, like I feel like I wanted to leverage AI a lot more. So I'm still thinking about like how to leverage, let's say, co-op, co-work, or thinking about other process like how do you make the research process more doable.
Do you have a team at all to like manage all the communications between like all these like big tech people and also like these VCs, or is it just yourself?
I would say it's like 95% myself. Then like primarily I am trying to use AI to like generate a lot more different things. So like, I hired like freelance designer for like, designing a poster or something. And I do want to one day have a team, and I'm talking to a lot of people on like, potentially running part of the operation stuff, but like, slash like, we have been doing some events, so I can do all the stuff myself. Like setting up the table or like, printing out the poster. And it's been pretty crazy. Yeah. Like I would say I am mostly me. So like, yeah. And I'm trying to leverage AI to do more.
There are weeks where you basically have like guesses for every single day at the same time in the morning, right?
Yeah.
How did you manage that? Was that like months before you already scheduled them? Or there's obviously like cancellations sometimes, right? Like how on earth did you get that process like so right where you can get one every single day?
Like you said, you have like, 40-50% inbound. We have been very lucky that we have tons of inbound. I would say I got really lucky that like, I would say even with cancellation, I think I just literally moved the calendar to a different day. That's it. It's like not that like it's like how you schedule your podcast, exactly like that, but just more times. Like there's like zero secret. Like, you just have to schedule it. Like you have to be like, hey, when's your schedule? And then they're like, what about this? And then you're like, yes or no. That's kind of it. So I don't think there's like, if you're asking for like a magic formula, dude, low key, like I wish there is one. It's just I just don't sleep. I like do the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's like every single time like the inbound happens, like right away, like within like 5 minutes, I would just like respond, and then we would just like schedule the meeting in like 3 seconds. And that's like how it literally works best. We often talk about like specifically say month one, two, three, four, five for the theoretical 6 month plan to break in VC.
I feel like the 6 months plan, I think in the month one, I would do like a lot of research, right? Like I would like look into like, what type of sector that I'm interested in, whether it's consumer or B2B SaaS or like anything that's like I'm interested in. And then I would try to become an expert at that. And then nowadays, like since everybody have a podcast, everybody have Stack, everybody have TikTok, maybe I'll just go on TikTok and then yap about that particular trend and then becoming the trend expert. And then the third month, I would started going to industries conference or like events locally. So let's say if I'm in New York or if I'm in Boston, I would go to like the Boston local meetup about startups and I start making friends. And then the fourth month, I would start, leveraging the insights I've learned from that industry and then start just like talking to like people in my local community, build deeper relationship, whether it's coffee chat, asking, these species for coffee or like these founders for coffee and, getting some like warm introduction to, potentially like meeting some of the partner at different VC firms. And, the fifth month, maybe I started scouting deals for the VC firm that I really want to work on. And then like just like sending them some deal flow and then build some track record and judgment about like why you think XYZ is good. Month six is like, where you ask, like, hey, after sending this deal flow, do you have a job opportunity for me? Or does your portfolio company have a job opportunity for me? That's how I would go about it today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now we go to a few rapid fire questions, one word or one sentence. Are you ready?
Yes.
If you could invest in any startup from the past, which one would it be?
Airbnb,
One person you want to interview but haven't yet.
Steve Jobs.
What is one fun fact about you most people don't know?
Dude, I'm such a transparent person. Like, I feel like I overshare on the internet all the time. I like to learn TikTok dances.
Is there any thoughts you want to finish or we didn't get to cover on this pod that you would like to talk about for Aspire VC?
We cover the fellowship, how to break into VC, how to like do a podcast, how to build network. If you're just being like a good person and then like try to deliver value to people, like people will just like think, want to hang out with you.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed about you is one, you went to the right environment, which is the Valley. Two, you're really consistent, like extremely consistent. And that is how you built it up is through the years. And then three is that, you're just a genuinely good person. So that was amazing, Grace. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about you, what's the best place to reach you?
I'm Grace Gong on LinkedIn. And then my podcast called Smart Venture Podcast and Venture with Grace. It's on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube.
I'll put that in the description below. And out of everyone you know, who are two amazing VCs that you will recommend as future guests to our podcast?
I love my friend Brian from Alumni Ventures and Benny from Acorn Capital. And I feel like they're just like good friends. And like, I like hanging out with them. And I feel like I saw them every week. So yeah.
Thank you again, and thanks to everyone who's listening. Common question you want to hear from Grace or our next guest. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share with someone who's interested in getting the venture. We'll see you next time on Break into VC.
Thank you.